welcome to our very first video for a classic car review. We are doing this in partnership with a great company here in Salt Lake City, Canon Classic Cars. They've been kind enough to let us work with some of their inventory, and we're going to determine over the course of many videos what our favorites actually are, and also what yours are going to be too. We've got a 5-point rating scale that we're going to be going through. One is going to be aesthetics. So looking at the design of the car, generally speaking, we're going to split that into two parts, both the interior and the exterior. Second, we're going to go into kind of the rarity of the car. How hard is it to get? How accessible is it? How collectible is it? Third, we'll get into the history of the car. How significant is this going to be in the grand scheme of you if you're wanting to collect or build or have something of your own? How hard is it going to be to get? Fourth, we're going to be going into the horsepower. We're going to be getting under the hood. We're going to be looking at the drivetrain. How fun is this car to actually drive? And lastly, how comfortable is it? If you have a car that is older, 9 times out of 10, you're thinking it might be a little bit softer. It might be a little bit less stable. So we're going to get into overall, how good is this car? We're ranking each of those out of 10. So ultimately we'll have a score out of 50 for the car. 5 is going to be pretty good, 7's going to be getting better, 9's going to be amazing, and 10 is basically going to be unobtainable. Hopefully we'll find one day. But I'm really excited to start off our series, our inaugural video, with an American icon, the C1 Corvette, 1962. For us to be able to rate this car appropriately, we're starting with the aesthetics, we're starting with the design. First things first, with a C1 Corvette, incredibly iconic curves. You can't mistake the teardrop, you can't mistake the chrome work and the badging, of course. This particular model, the 1962, had some really interesting design changes from the earlier C1 Corvettes. Early models like the 1953 all the way through the 57 only had a single headlight. These split in 58 to a dual headlight, and they also removed some of the thicker chrome bumper process that was across the front. And in 61, they actually went to listing Corvette across the front of the vehicle instead of just inside the badge. Other things that we really enjoy about an old car like this, I really like the tail end of it. The split bumper, all the chrome work. And the other fun thing about the 62 is that we have the tail lights here that are also separated. Earlier versions of the C1 had one that ran along this back fender taper right here. So these being below that horizon line really gives it some great angles and beautiful lines. For the exterior of this car, how smooth it is, how incredibly well all of the angles work together and flow together to accent the silhouette of this car. I think for the exterior, I'm going to have to give this probably a 4.5. We'll say a 4.3 out of 5. There are better, but this is pretty dang good. It's a great place to start. Part 2 of our aesthetics is going to be the interior design. On the inside here, I sat in it a little bit ago. You really have to get your leg in underneath the steering wheel. It is a pretty tight fit. Getting underneath the steering wheel is a little tougher, but once you're in there, the cockpit's really confined and tight. As far as it looks though, it's absolutely beautiful. You've got great chrome work, you've got leather and bezels that are going across the front. I love the half moon when it comes down to the speedometer. It really is an iconic and classic shape. And I also love the fact that the inside of the main tray there has Corvette listed right across the front of it. All in all, the interior, because of how classic it is and because of the piping and the original work on it, I think that this one's also going to be probably about a 4.2 for me. So overall, we said, what, 4.3 and a 4.2. So we've got an 8.5 out of 10 for our interior and for our design overall for the car. It's a really, really strong score for this vehicle. Part two, if we're going in to figure out how great this car is, we have to look at the accessibility and the rarity of a C1 Corvette. Now, it changes from year to year. The C1 series went all the way from 1953 with the original Corvette all the way through to 1962 with the one that we have right here. The 1953, there were only 300 of them that were actually made. So incredibly rare. It's going to be impossible for you to get one. If you do get one, let me know and I'll come and take a look. As far as later in the releases for the vehicles, they upped their production runs. So the 1962 actually got all the way up to over 14,600 units that were released. So overall, there were somewhere in the range of about 69,000 plus C1 Corvettes ranging across all of the years that were available for purchase. Because the tail end of these had so many more than the earlier models, these ones are obviously going to be a little bit easier to obtain, but still not as easy to get as you might think. The main comparable cars that you were looking at in the C1 range when you were competing with other American cars were things like the Ford Thunderbirds. You were looking at other cars from overseas like the Austin Healey's. The original purchase price on these back in '62 were in the range of about $4,500. So really a pretty expensive car for the day. Now, if you're looking to pick one up, as far as accessibility is concerned, I did a little bit of research on Bring a Trailer for the accessibility of something like this for someone like me. For a '62, on the very, very low end, I'm looking in the range of about $20,000 to $25,000 if it's a project car. So if I am trying to build it from scratch and it's kind of beat to crap and been left in a garage, that might be where I'm looking, but they're very far few and in between because they're such a sought-after car. If I'm looking at one like this, which is actually for sale at Cannon Classic through consignment, this one's going for what, about $69,000, $69,000, which is right in the middle of the range that we saw on Bring a Trailer. They range about $40,000 to $80,000 depending on the different modifications, depending on the color, depending on if their numbers matching or not. The really high end of these, though, we saw one go last year as high as $299,000 on Bring a Trailer. So you have a very wide spectrum, but with regards to accessibility for you and your pocketbook, you're looking probably in the $40,000 to $80,000 range, with this one sitting right close to the middle, about $68,000, $69,000. So as far as accessibility goes, these ones are a little bit more difficult to get than other competing cars of the time, like a '57 Thunderbird or even a '62 Thunderbird. There were hundreds of thousands of those produced. For the accessibility on this car and for the rating that I'm going to have to give it, I'm going to have to say probably a 6.8. It's not something that is so difficult to come across. There's lots of them that are listed at any given time on Bring a Trailer, or you'll see them through other auction sites. You'll find them in condition like this with consignment stores and shops like that. But they're far few and in between. So a little more difficult to get, but not over the price expensive and crazy like something way earlier in the model range like a 53 or a 54. Now for the historical significance of the Corvette. I am not anyone who has to tell you how iconic this car is. It literally is the synonymous vehicle when you think of American muscle cars. This is the original. 1953, debuted at the Motorama Auto Show in New York at the Waldorf Astoria on the showroom floor. The 53 was the post-war answer to Europe's sports car craze. This two-seater sports car really changed the entire destiny of America when it came to cars, automaking, and how we feel about what American cars really are. They have not been pulled off production since '53. They've had many generations since. We're currently sitting at, what, a C8 Corvette that is now a mid-engine, which is very far removed from what we saw in the originals. But the historical significance of this car cannot be undersold. It is absolutely incredible. The most important things that I really think we need to consider when we're looking at the historical value and the historical factor of this car, I'm going to speak specifically to the 62 because it's the one that we're reviewing here. This model really was the one that took the horsepower for this car and upped it to a place where American sports cars were taken seriously. This car, with a 327 cubic inch, and the high performance models with a fuel injection system putting out 360 horsepower from the showroom floor, was unmatched. It was unparalleled at its time, coming off the factory floor. So this car in particular really was the one that took Corvette, took Chevy, took GM, put them on the map. And it continues to do so to this day. For all of those reasons, historical significance, this thing's getting an 8.9. It is absolutely, absolutely one of the best cars you could think of if you're talking about any kind of classic. Everyone knows what you're talking about, everyone covets it, and everyone wants one. Coming on to number 4 is our power. Now, we mentioned in the last little segment on the historical side of it, this thing has a 327 cubic inch V8 motor in it. The early C1 Corvettes actually started with a 6-cylinder, and they transitioned into V8s later on in the model ranges. But this 327, this one in particular, doesn't have the high-performance fuel injection package, does, however, have a 4-barrel carb that's putting out about 330 horsepower. The ranges that you were able to get this car in off the showroom floor came in 4 different options. You had one that had 250 horses, one that had 300, one that had about 330, and then you had the high performance at 360. Great level of ranges for you to be able to get, and had a lot of different options for you to be able to really make this what you wanted it to be. As far as the drivetrain was concerned, this one currently has a 4-speed manual transmission. Did come with an option of a 3-speed manual as well as automatics in both of those. As far as the overall power and accessibility of this car, really, really high for the time. Although when we start thinking about the overall broader spectrum of classic vehicles that are out there, not the highest end of the spectrum that we're ultimately going to get to in the future. For those reasons, I think that our score on the powertrain on this is going to have to come in at probably a solid 7. I think that fits it about right. Our final component is obviously the comfort. So when it comes down to comfort in a car like this, a lot of the times it's going to be relative. What other kind of cars am I driving? Is the top in fact down? Is it a rainy day? Is it a sunny day? For the most part, I think this is fantastic. But there are a few things that I have to call out. The cockpit inside this car is a little bit cramped. If I'm reaching for pedals, my steering wheel is all the way down in my lap. The shifter's a good distance for me to be able to get to, but the overall feel of this is a little bit more difficult to navigate. The other key thing here for me while I'm sitting in the cockpit is if I'm tall, I'm looking almost right at the horizon line here of my windshield on the top of my windscreen. Makes visibility a little bit more difficult. And I've got a tapered door that is coming from the bottom here all the way up into my side. So if I'm cruising and I just want to rest my arm, it's absolutely perfect. But if I have the top up, windows up, and I'm trying to drive like this, it becomes a little bit tighter. I think the last thing to really note here, I have good visibility across everything with this bubble windscreen that I've got. The seats themselves are very comfortable, very plush. I like the fact that I have a little bit of movement and I have accessibility to everything that I need to, and I can see everything that I need to get to. I also love the long sweeping hood off the end of this. So as far as comfort's concerned, I think that I'm going to have to give this a little bit lower score, probably closer to about a 5.8. But overall, I'd still drive it. It's been awesome taking the time to be able to get a little bit deeper with this 62 Corvette. Truly is an American icon. After adding up all the scores, we have our very first review and our first setup for this car coming in at a whopping 37 out of 50. That is a pretty high mark, and it's a good benchmark for us to be setting. We're really looking forward to the partnership with Canon Classic Cars. There's going to be a lot of other fun reviews of cars like this coming up here in the near future. Really could not be more grateful to them for their help in getting this channel up and started and being able to help debut a little bit of their inventory. And if you guys want to buy this car, shoot them a call. We'll leave their information in the description for you. This is available right now. This can be yours. Thank you very much for watching. If you could please like, subscribe, join us in the comments. What do you think of this car? If you were to rate this, what would you give it? I think a 37 out of 50 is a fantastic score. If you disagree, let me know. And in the meantime, if you want to get some awesome merch like I'm wearing here, we are going to be putting one up of a C1 Corvette on our site here by the end of the week. So go get some apparel, join us next time, and thank you very much. We'll see you soon.